stop processing material. So if anybody's ever been to Ecology Action, it's a little dirty place on the corner. It was piling up with materials. The board came in, brought another executive director and said, you guys got to listen to this and we're going to fire all of you. So they said no, and they went on strike again. And they said, we don't want any more bosses. And with the help of the IWW, formed a worker cooperative. Now, the IWW didn't do the worker cooperative part. The people at the organization did it, but the IWW helped them with the National Labor Relations Board, and the board acquiesced finally. A lot of people on the board left, and so in 2000, starting in 2000 when the first strike happened, and then became a worker cooperative. So the organization looks completely different now, but with some of the same ideas as they had in the early 70s. Right? So that's to me is a clear example of that. I think Common Ground in New Orleans is another clear example of that. What we envisioned at the very beginning in September 5th, 2005, and what it looks like now is not the same. It doesn't mean I'm disappointed in it. I have a history of starting a lot of organizations and just letting them be what they're going to be. That's one of the things I've learned about, like, I can't control them and I don't want to. Even Treasure City, you know, when I started that in 2006, it looks different, a little different now than I want, because people have all these great ideas that we never thought about to throw in. And that's the beauty of collective thinking or cooperative thinking, is that one person doesn't have to think of the whole damn thing, you know? Let's go back to where you were talking about structural things.
Yeah.
Oh, about maintaining people.
Maintaining, because yeah, obviously collectives do go through changes, but maintaining, obviously, with core principles, how do you maintain like a consistent, to an extent, a consistent group of people to maintain that the work and the project maintains its basic functionality?
I'm going to tell you that it's really difficult with volunteer organizations.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
That's the nature of it, because there is no bar to hold people there. There's no economics, housing related to it, things like really core things, and that people come to it because they want to, but they also leave it because they have other priorities at the time. And it's a really difficult thing. One thing that I would say, though, is that that I have found, and that social scientists have found, is that the higher the bar of entry, the more people want into your organization. So if you don't make it crazy easy for everybody to walk in off the street and to get into, and I'm not saying like you got to haze them and do all these things, but I'm just saying, but if you make the bar of entry a little higher, people have more vested interest in it. And why the social psychology of that works, I have no idea. But it does happen in organizations.
That's something we've been...
Ecology Action, if you applied for a job at ours, like we have people who want to work there all the time. And I tell people, you can't just want a job. You have to really want to work here. And that makes people want to work there more. If you come to work at our job, which you're going to deal with human feces, you're going to deal with needles on the lot, you're going to deal with garbage and waste, you're going to deal with food waste. I mean, you're going to get dirty. Right? We tell people this, but you're also going to do amazing things there, You have to come for 3 interviews for a $17 an hour job. 3 interviews. And we're going to grill you for an hour on each thing. And one of the things that we do is we pass out these principles of unity and these things. And so when you come to the first interview, if you made it to the interview process, you know that you got called down from a lot of people. So we give you the principles, and then you have to go home and you have to think about them. Because if we call you back for a second or third interview, we're going to ask you questions about that. We make the bar of entry very clear, and we also make it very difficult to get in, so that we weed out people who are just barely interested. And it's much easier because there's capitalist points tied to it. A job, there's a lot riding on it. It's way harder to do that with a volunteer organization, but you can still set that up. And the thing about principles, though, is that if you get a core collective of people, say like for the first year you operate with a bunch of people, 5 or 6 people that you have, and then say that 4 people leave and then 8 more people come in and there's only like 3 or 4 original people, you have to reevaluate. I would recommend reevaluating your principles and your guidelines and stuff. All documents that we make them living documents, living, breathing documents. Not to be interpreted by judges far away, but to be reinterpreted by the people who are affected by them directly. The principles at Ecology Action, at Treasure City, go through revisions whenever there's a big change in the collective there, because we want to make sure that they're relevant to people so people have buy-in on them, so they're not being imposed on somebody. When you're a new hire, you don't have any say, but when you're there, we have staff retreats, and we actually go and say, like, hey, do these values work with you? And don't try to control how your organization is going to be. Let it be what it's going to be. There's a lot of power in that. Do that. And as far as retention, this is the same thing with all movements. People will stay involved as long as it's relevant to their life. But the same problem that you're having, or that other groups are having, churches have it, social groups have it. We all have it, and people come and go in things because it's volunteer. So I think treating people with respect when they come in, making sure that they're welcome and things like that is really important to build those things. Definitely, and to maintain that, and maintain a culture of appreciation. So one of the things in Ecology Action that we forget about, and I keep using Ecology Action because that's the point of reference I have the most because I work with it every day, is that we forget to appreciate people, the little things that we do. So we actually have in our principles a culture of appreciation to remember that. To go, man, thanks for doing that. Or like, I really appreciate everybody in this organization for doing these things because we don't have to do it. So, anybody else have any other questions or comments, concerns? Yes?
I worked for the Washington State Department of Ecology for a year, and while I worked there, I felt as if there were a lot of things that the organization did right. I did a lot of work around estuarine, riparian areas, salmon habitat, trying to increase the salmon stocks. We have salmon stocks as they go to Alaska and come back, and while I was living there for a year, I got the sense, for the most part, there are a lot of things that the state did right as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if there's any place within realizing institutions as legitimate and letting them be or exist, or if anarchism as a principle is always the best way to go
Well,
forward.
anarchism is not a replacement for the state. Anarchism is philosophy, a set of ideas, like a set of practices. So don't confuse it. Like, it's not like communism. Like, we have this social scientific thing, and like we're like, we'll take down capitalism and we'll just replace it with this. That's not what it's like. If you work there and that's where you live, you organize it however you want, as long as it doesn't oppress people, the planet, and animals around you, or us down in Texas. If you were working it up there, And the thing is, like, the reality of it is that there will always be some level of coercion in it, whether it's social coercion or the use of force. Does everybody know about the ideas of coercion? Let's don't candy coat it. Anarchism has coercion in it, right? Sometimes it's just reinforced by our values and principles because of the fact that we do that sometimes by groups being together. There's social coercion. There's all subtle levels, but there's also use of force, right? And that way I would envision some anarchist futures, that there will be some use of force, not just self-defense, but some use of force. And that doesn't necessarily mean killing people or anything like that. It can be, all kinds of things: shame, ridicule, and embarrassment. All kinds of things. So that's one piece of it. The other thing is that there will always be, or at least the way I'm sitting here today, what I think, there will always be some level of organization, whether we call it governments or not. Doesn't matter, but I think at some point some groups will get together to make resources, defend communities. Those are going to be organizations. But what we call them, but the reason to me they're different than governments is that government is not accountable. Elected representatives don't fucking represent me. They don't represent anybody in here. Does anybody feel like their congressperson represents them? How many people have talked to their congressperson? How many people have even talked to a city council person? How many people have talked to their school board? How many talk to a regent here? None of those people represent us. They don't even know any of us. Let's don't make any mistake about it. But if we scale things down, so it's not Washington State that does it, it's somebody in that bioregion that deals with it, and maybe somebody in the town next to it or the city next to it, whatever it looks like in the future, they have their own thing based on the same ideas. And again, I'm not telling you the future. I'm telling you what my interpretation of it could be.
Yeah, and within a lot of conservation organizations, there's always like interaction with private landowners. It's not always It's not always just the state imposing some sort of corrosive force. It's like asking the private landowner to take care of some invasive weed along the riverbank.
Right. And the thing is, when I talk about the state, I obviously hit things with broad strokes. I can think of a lot of good things like universal health care. I'm for it, man. As long as we're going to have laws, as long as we're going to have taxes, I want to pay for that way more than I want to pay for the military. But that doesn't mean that we don't still build health care in our own neighborhoods. right? Dual power, remember we were talking about that? So dual power, we resist the state on one hand, but we still build, because universal health care is still not going to take care of everybody here. Well, maybe a lot of people in this room, but not people in my neighborhood. Those people are still going to fall through the safety nets, and how do we deal with that? Right, so we still do things on our own scale. Because I'd rather know the doctors in my neighborhood or the nurses who could check out Miss Betty or Mr. Clifton in my neighborhood than try to drive them to some hospital where 2,000 other people are going to be. You know, or go to take them to Brackenridge where, you know, they just got, I'm going to leave you at the emergency room, I'll see you later. So, yes?
Speaking of scale, do you think it's possible or even desirable to have scale on sort of a horizontal basis where it's kind of federated, where the next level up is controlled by the levels below, that doesn't, I guess run afoul of...
I would never want that, where there's something here controlling something up there. I just want it here, each thing, you know. The thing is, like, before industrialization as we know it in the last 100 years, people shared water, where there was no problem with that. Like, there was people who lived all along rivers, waterways, they shared it. Like in industrial society, like civil society, as well as like native lands, whatever. People shared forests, you know, landowners shared things. There's ways to do things that we just haven't thought about in a long time. And I don't talking about going back to 5,000 years, I'm talking about 100 years ago, 150 years ago. I'm not even talking about trying to get back to the good old days. I want to take the good old days and combine it with things that we hadn't even thought about and create some badass mix that we haven't thought about. But I don't want to do it, I want us to do it. And I want other communities to do it. But I know that we can do it. And if we do it in a spirit of cooperation, it's going to be a lot easier. And the cooperation doesn't mean that we all have to be part of collectives, because one of the things I really believe is that in the ideal future I would see is that some people do live by themselves. They can interact however they want. Everybody doesn't have to live in cooperatives and collectives, and we all have to be, you know, hunky-dory. That some people do live by themselves. Some people do not interact with people. It's fine. It's okay.
I guess like my question was rooted in like, so if we have Wheatsville and let's say a bunch of food co-ops starting up like in the surrounding areas like Round Rock and San Marcos.
Yeah, what if we had 4 in East Austin?
Yeah, and let's say they're all independent of one another, not like all owned by Wheatsville, but
right.
all different. And rather than like pay a capitalist warehouse to like store their stuff and send them stuff, they kind of cooperate on another level to like own a warehouse collectively. Is that?
Well, I mean, that's sure that's a scenario, but to do that is predicated on so much exploitation already. You know, like one thing that is hard for us to imagine is that we've all grown up with H-E-B's and Tom Thumbs and all these giant grocery stores. They used to not exist. Even when I was a kid, when those started coming around, it was really weird to see. My grandparents owned grocery stores. Remember how we have convenience stores on every corner? They owned grocery stores they owned a grocery store that was like that. There used to be, in some cities, they still have bodegas everywhere. Like in New York, they have bodegas on every corner. That's the way I imagine. Some farmer takes their stuff to that store on some corner, maybe to two stores that are, you know, within walking distance of each other, and then other farmers are feeding other ones. We start to localize things on such scale that you can't even think within 2 miles, within a mile, within walking distance. That's the thing I'm talking about. All the fossil fuel lives that we live in are going to come to an end, maybe not in our lifetimes, will come to an end at some point. It's just inevitable. Civil society as we know it will come to an end at some point. We think it's always going to be forever because we only live for, you know, 80 years or 100 years if we're doing good, but it all comes to an end at some point. And when I say that, I don't mean that in like some doom and gloom way, actually. I'm just like, things transform, things change. If we stood still, things would still change around us. But everything that we live on, the fact that that sofa exists, the fact that the clothes that we wear is predicated on exploitation. That is not sustainable for the planet, animals, and people. And so I want us to reimagine things on super micro scales. And again, I don't know how it's going to look. Like maybe some we are going to have warehouses, but you know where they're going to power the refrigeration for that or something. I'm talking about like things are moving daily. We're eating I'm not eating strawberries except for in summertime when they're available in Texas locally. I'm not getting strawberries all year round from Chile and all these places. You know. I'm making this up.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's hard to think about though. Like I remember, hold your thought for 1 second. I want to tell you the reason that really compelled me more than anything is that, remember when I talk about how I talk about New Orleans is like you can't imagine it? I saw how fast all of this stuff can collapse. All of this stuff is a house of cards. And I don't mean that in a scary way or anything, but everything is a house of cards. If something in this house of cards is pulled out, it falls so fast. And it's amazing. In New Orleans, one of the things I watched, besides the collapse of the Gulf Coast region in that area, is the warehousing of stuff that comes in from places. So it comes from China and gets to Walmart, and then they ship it and stuff. Warehouses in a 5-state area started to empty out in this crazy circle. You couldn't get gas, you couldn't get bottles of water, you couldn't get water containers for months, because all the warehouses are predicated on this fossil fuel thing of getting stuff within 24 hours. And not in things moving at this certain rate. All these things that are kind of this chain reaction, and it broke down. And all of a sudden the demand was higher, and nobody could fill it because it was like, oh, we still have to make more of those. And when I saw the collapse of civil society as we know it, I was like, we have to do something different. We have to do something different. And what I wanted to do when I first got back was I wanted to get off the grid in the middle of the city because I saw how precarious it was. I didn't want to have to worry about how I got water, food, electricity, any of them basic things. And it was a little nutty. Listen, I went through a lot of things. I wasn't all together. It was a noble intent. Put solar panels on my house. I was going to put a battery backup so that when the grid went down, that I would still have power. I was going to get 30,000-gallon water tanks. I got chickens. I've been vegan for 20-something years. I got chickens. I got goats, which I love. I love my little goats. I have pygmy goats in my backyard. And I was going to milk them. I was like, man, I'm never going to rely on anything. I'm going to milk these goats. I'm going to drink milk. I never drink milk. I never drink milk. And I'm like, I'm going to milk these goats. I did never do that. They're just glorified vegan dogs now because I take them for walks in the neighborhood. But that was the intent. And so, but that initial vision of seeing how fast civil society can collapse was almost like seeing the promised land in some way. It was a horror because it was terrible, really, because people are dying all over the place and that we are not able to take care of them. But I could see that we need to figure out something else. And then so since 2005, it's really put me on this other trajectory of really thinking about what else we can do. And not just me, but wanting to engage people across the country and what we can do is thinking differently about stuff. So I think I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I think I worked a 10-hour day today at my job. So and I fed my animals at 6 this morning. So I've been up for a while, and I've got to speak in the morning for an hour. So
thank you so much, Scott.
Well, thank you all for coming. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah. Right on. Thanks for having me over here. Whew. If you have follow-up questions, you can find me on Facebook. Do not email me through Facebook or it'll get lost because I get thousands of emails through there. But if you see my email in there, you can ask me questions. I will answer. I answer every email I get. I just don't answer it quickly. But if you want to have follow-up conversations about stuff, I'm totally happy to do that. And also, if you look at my website, and if you want to friend me on Facebook, that's fantastic. We can be friends. We can look at stuff. There's lots of articles about things that we're talking about. You can find me on Twitter also. And you can also find my website, and there's a lot of articles written on there that I have about some of these ideas and some of these things. So. Also have a book, and you can get my book too. So.
Is it Monkey Wrench?
It is Monkey Wrench. I have some copies for sale tonight if anybody wants some tonight. If you buy them from me, you can have them for $17. If you buy them from bookstores, they have them at Treasure City and Book People and all the places are $20. So it talks about community organizing, talks about the pitfalls of what happened in New Orleans and all those things. Highly recommended reading. It's an easy read too. You can read it in if you're going to the bathroom, you can just read it really quickly. It's really, so.
Woohoo! If anyone's interested and wants a free school calendar, we got a bunch on the table.
Yeah, thanks to the Free School for having me here.
Thanks for coming in.